Have you ever heard of a cannibal story? Back in 2002, Germany had a terrifying cannibal so shocking that even the most violent prisoner in jail avoided him after learning what he did. After finding the right target, he cut off the victim's genitals, fried them as a snack, and ate them right in front of him. Then he sliced off the flesh, stored it in the freezer, kept eating it for 10 whole months. The creepiest part? The victim volunteered to be his prey. Today's case is about ArminMeiwes, born on December 1st, 1961, in Rothenburg, Essen, Germany. By professional, he was a computer technician. When Armin was young, his family had 5 members: his parents, 2 half-brothers, and himself. But when he was just 8, his father abandoned him and his mother. His 2 brothers later left home to make their own way, leaving only him and his mother. According to what Armin later told the police, the absence of his father made him feel deeply lonely, and his sexual orientation was also different from most. He was bisexual. During his teenage years, Armin developed a desire to consume human flesh. However, because he was still young, the urge wasn't strong enough to become uncontrollable. He managed to suppress it, living a seemingly normal life, completing his education and working as a computer technician. When Armin is 38, his mother, who had raised him, passed away at the age of 77. After that, he lived alone in the old house she had left him. According to later reports, Armin likely had an Oedipus complex. After his mother's death, he kept the house exactly as it was when she was alive. Not only that, he would often wear her clothes, imitate her voice, treat her bedroom like a shrine, and even placed a human skull under her pillow for ritual purpose. 2 years later, when Armin turned 40 in 2001, unable to cope with the grief of losing his mother, his long-suppressed cannibalistic urges reached their peak, to the point of becoming a psychological disorder. To satisfy his desire, he began his hunt. At first, Armin posted an ad on a cannibalism-themed website called Cannibal Cafe. The ad read, "Looking for a well-built man aged 18 to 30 who is willing to be slaughtered and eaten." From a normal person's perspective, even if someone stumbled upon such an ad, they'd likely ignore it. Even the curious who clicked would back out immediately upon realizing the poster was dead serious. But shockingly, after Armin posted the ad, over 280 people contacted him, expressing interest. Among them, 200 claimed they were willing to be eaten, 30 offered to help him, and more than a dozen were simply fascinated by the process and wanted to witness it firsthand. Armin quickly began sending invitations to those who met his criteria. For example, "I hope you can come to me soon. I'm starving. Tell me your weight and height. I will slaughter you and eat the tastiest parts of your flesh." In an email to a user named Hansel, Armin wrote that roasting and eating him was a perfect idea. He added that based on Hansel's height and weight, he could yield about 35 kilograms of meat. If each person ate 500 grams, it would take 70 people to finish him entirely. Armin even fantasized about how delicious Hansel's meat would be, insisting that none of it should go to waste. He urged Hansel to contact him soon if he was serious. Those who claimed they wanted it to be eaten also expressed their determination in disturbing ways. An Italian man using the name Matteo told Armin, "I want you to burn off my testicles with a ring of fire, and I hope you whip me to death." On Christmas 2001, Armin connected with another man who promised to provide him with a young boy, but backed out days later and never spoke to him again. Armin later recalled, that the man had claimed he wanted to be eaten during Genitals, a Russian Orthodox festival also known as the Butter Week, which celebrates the end of winter. Armin took him seriously, but after Christmas, when he tried to confirm the plan, the man ghosted him. This led Armin to wonder if the man had actually been eaten by someone else. Besides exchanging messages with many people about his cannibalistic fantasies, Armin did meet some in person, intending to go through with it, but most of them freaked out at the last moment. Among those who claimed they wanted to be eaten by Armin, he selected 4 individuals and invited them to his home, where he described in detail how he planned to consume them. At this point, you might assume these 4 people must have had some mental issues. Why else would they willingly agree to be eaten? But if that's what you're thinking, you'd be completely wrong. All 4 were mentally stable and held ordinary jobs. One was a university student, another a teacher, the third a chef, and the last a hotel waiter. However, for various reasons, none of them ended up being eaten by Armin. But besides those 4, Armin had also met with several others who initially volunteered to be eaten, only to back out at the last moment. One of them was a man from southern Germany who made an unusual request. He wanted Armin to pick him up in a cattle truck and slaughter him like a pig. Armin refused that idea and instead told him to take the train to Essen. When the man actually arrived, Armin, just as he'd hoped, greeted him at the station wearing rubber boots. The man even kissed Armin's boots before following him home, where they toured the slaughter room Armin had prepared. But just as Armin was about to go through with it, the man suddenly changed his mind. He begged for his life, and Armin, true to his word, didn't force the act. Instead, he let him go. Afterward, the two even shared jokes, beer, and pizza like nothing had happened. Similarly, Alex from Essen, Germany, also made a special request after arriving at Armin's house. He wanted Armin to cut off his head, but Armin refused this request, giving the reason that Alex was too fat and it would be difficult for him to do it properly. Then there was a man named Stefan from Kassel, Germany, who almost ended up as Armin's meal. Armin had already hung him on the meat hooks in the slaughter room and marked where to cut on his body. But in the end, because the slaughter room was too cold, after some discussion, they decided not to go through with it, and so Stefan narrowly escaped his fate. There was also a man named Dirk, who nearly became Armin's victim. According to Armin, Dirk had one special request before being killed. Armin had to read out an official death sentence document, just like in a real courtroom. After Armin downloaded a similar legal documents from the internet, Dirk followed the same pattern as previous volunteers. He backed out upon arriving at Armin's house. True to form, Armin let him go, and they even ended up going to see a movie together. These repeated failures left Armin increasingly frustrated. In his desperation, he decided to relax his age restrictions for potential victims. It was at this point that a man named Bernd actively sought out Armin, declaring his willingness to be eaten. This time, Armin finally succeeded in carrying out his gruesome plan. Bernd was 43 years old at the time, a computer expert from Berlin. Like Armin, he suffered from several psychological disorders, but with one crucial difference. Bernd's illness manifested as a desperate desire to be eaten by someone. This disturbing fact is clearly evidenced by the nearly 1,000 emails exchanged between them, the contents of which can only be described with 2 words: horrifying and bizarre. In one of their early email exchanges, Armin attempted to lure Bernd into willingly become his prey by writing, I'll make the best spaghetti and sauce you have ever had." And eager to fulfill his macabre wish, Byrne responded, "You'll never need to buy meat again. Just kill me, and you'll have all the meat you could want." Afterwards, Byrne and Armin discussed how Armin would handle Byrne's remains after killing him. Byrne asked Armin, "What will you do with my head?" Armin replied that he would cut it off and set it aside. Byrne then suggested it would be better to bury his head in the ground, preferably in the cemetery since no one would notice. He also mentioned grinding it into powder as an even less conspicuous option. Armin responded that there was a decent cemetery near his house where he could bury Byrne's head. As for his skull, Byrne had another idea. He told Armin to use it as an ashtray. At the end of this email, Byrne vividly expressed his excitement about being eaten by Armin. It goes, "I hope you were serious about this, because I truly want to be eaten. My body is looking forward to your stomach." In fact, many similar exchanges appeared throughout their emails correspondence, too many to list here. But one thing was clear. Both Armin and Byrne shared an obsessive fascination with cannibalism. Soon after they finally met in person, their dark fantasies became reality. Armin got to taste human flesh, while Byrne fulfilled his dream of being consumed. According to the videotape they recorded themselves, Armin chose March 9, 2001 as the day he would consume Byrne. On that day, Armin brought Byrne back to his home in Rothenburg, the same house that would later become infamous among German police as the House of Horrors. They had agreed to film the entire process as a keepsake. Then Armin led Byrne down the hallway and showed him the specially designed slaughter room he had prepared. Located on the second floor, the room was small and windowless, but packed with disturbing secrets. The ceiling of the room had a meat hook hanging down. This was where Armin planned to hang the victim's body. In the corner stood a cage, which Armin said was for the victim to rest in. After touring the slaughter room, Byrne seemed completely satisfied. In fact, he and Armin even had sex there. As Armin later explained, this was their way of releasing their intense emotions. Then they moved to the kitchen, where Byrne followed the plan by swallowing 20 sleeping pills and downing a bottle of hard liquor. With a nod, he signaled to Armin that he was ready. It was time to begin. Following their prearranged plan, Armin first attempted to bite off Byrne's genitals. But after struggling for a long time without success, he gave up and simply used the knife to cut it off instead, leaving Byrne's bleeding wound untreated. Next, he originally planned to eat Byrne's genitals raw, but when he actually tried chewing it, he found the texture too tough and rubbery. So Armin chopped it up with a knife, seasoned it with salt, pepper, and garlic, then fried it into a snack, which he happily ate. The most disturbing part, Byrne was fully conscious and watching the entire process unfold beside him. Later, Armin dragged Byrne into a bathtub filled with hot water and made him swallow a large amount of painkillers, sleeping pills, and hard liquor. While Byrne lay there, Armin sat beside the tub, completely engrossed in reading an adventure novel. After about 10 hours, around 4:15 a.m., when Byrne had lost consciousness and the tub was filled with his blood, Armin kissed him goodbye. Then he lifted Byrne out of the water and dragged him into the slaughter room. There, Armin slit Byrne's throat and severed his head. He then hung the headless body from the meat hook and, while listening to pleasant music on the radio, proceeded to carve off 65 pounds of flesh from Byrne's corpse. He divided the meat into portions, packed them in plastic bags, and stashed them in the cellar and even under frozen pizzas in the freezers. For the next 10 months, Armin would take a portion of meat to eat every day. But it wasn't just the flesh. He also roasted Burns' arm bones until charred, ground them into powder, and mixed them into flour to make food. He buried Burns' organs and teeth in the garden, the same place where he often grilled human meat and had picnics. Later, when the meat he had cut from Burns' body was nearly gone, Armin started looking for a new prey. This time, he again chose to post an ad on a website. Soon after, a young man from Australia came across the ad, and just like the previous 280 respondents, he showed strong interest in Armin's offer. At first, the guy thought Armin was just joking or pulling some sick prank, but after exchanging messages for a while, he gradually realized a horrifying truth. Armin had actually eaten human flesh. He was a real-life cannibal. So the young man immediately reported to the German police. And following the address Armin had posted online, the police tracked him down and found 15 pounds of frozen meat in his home. All that remained of the long-deceased burned. Just like that, in December 2002, Armin was arrested and thrown behind bars. When the case came to light, it caused a massive uproar worldwide. But figuring out how to sentence Armin left the judges completely stumped. Germany had no specific laws against cannibalism, and during the initial trial, evidence like Burns' handwritten were proved he had willingly consented to being eaten, meaning there was no way to charge Armin with murder. So the state court in Kassel could only convict him of killing on request, basically murder by invitation, and sentence him to just 8.5 years for manslaughter. However, in January in 2006, due to widespread public dissatisfaction with the court's verdict, the German federal court decided to overturn the ruling under intense social pressure. The case was then retried by the Frankfurt District Court. During the retrial, the Frankfurt court determined that Armin had suffered from severe psychological disturbance at the time of the crime. His motives for killing and cannibalism were driven by a desire to satisfy his own sexual urge. This constituted murder. Moreover, evidence showed that Armin had attempted to commit similar crimes again. Had no one reported him, he would undoubtedly have continued preying on others. Taking all this into account, the Frankfurt District Court delivered its final verdict, sentencing him to life imprisonment for murder. When the judge read out the verdict, Armin, dressed in a gray suit, remained eerily calm throughout. His only reactions were slight body swaying, occasional nods, and those chilling grins that flashed his teeth. This made it painfully clear Armin never showed a shred of remorse for his actions. It's said that even the most hardened criminals in prison avoided this notorious cannibal like the plague. They always keep their distance, especially during mealtimes. The prison authorities didn't allow Armin near the kitchen either, instead assigning him a job in the library. Rumor has it that Armin later offered 1 million euros, hoping someone would hire him as a producer to adapt his story for the big screen. But no one took him up on the offer. In the end, Armin's tale remained locked behind prison walls, becoming a bone-chilling dark legend. This is Charles, bringing you crime story analysis. If you like this channel, please like, subscribe, and turn on the notification button. If in case you want me to dig in and share, leave a message on the comment section, and I will see you next time.